I'm here to introduce the future of author events. Thank you. Da-dum-dum. I couldn't resist. So as part of my work curating events, I read about what's happening in the worlds of bookselling and publishing and the culture at large. And I've read the articles and seen the social posts from authors about the various lawsuits for copyright infringement by AI companies using the labor of years to feed to their models. And it's impossible to avoid seeing the threats to education, labor, and current business models. If you believe the marketing, it almost seems like AI will make us all redundant. As part of my work for the writing and reading community, I felt it would be important for us as a Center for Fiction to engage in a thoughtful way on this topic, which brings us to our panel tonight. Now, 1 hour is not nearly enough time to address this topic, but I hope we'll have a conversation that will deepen our understanding and create a sense of community together. Before I bring the panel up, I want to share something that Ocean Vuong said to booksellers about 10 years ago about the predictive algorithms that were supposed to make booksellers redundant. I feel there's a good parallel to AI and writers. The way I see it, whenever someone walks into a bookstore, they are walking into the future of their cultural and intellectual life. Online bookstores with their algorithms can only show you where you've been, can only give you calcified mirror of your past. In a bookstore, you get a human being who is also a map maker of possibility, which I thought was, we love writers, right? They just have such a way with words. I've asked some people who work with and study the technology and 2 authors who are writing critically about it to join us on our panel. Dashiel Carrera is a novelist, human-centered AI researcher, and media artist, a visiting PhD researcher at Columbia University. His research explores how generative AI will affect the trajectory of contemporary literature. Tuhin Chakrabarty is assistant professor of computer science department at Stony Brook University. His research on generative AI and fair use has been profiled by The New Yorker, and his empirical findings on market dilution and substitution effects are being used by leading US law firms in ongoing AI copyright litigation. Bruce Holsinger is the author of Culpability, named the 116th selection of Oprah's Book Club, and longlisted for the 2026 Aspen World's Literary Prize. It really is a great way to kind of experience the ethical questions around AI, this novel. He is the editor of a quarterly journal, New Literary History, and teaches English at the University of Virginia. And our moderator this evening is Maris Kreizman, author of I Want to Burn This Place Down. She's an essayist and columnist for the Literary Hub, whose work has appeared in the New York Times, New York Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, Vanity Fair, and Esquire. And on top of all that, she's an extraordinary literary citizen. I'm very happy that she's going to moderate tonight. Please welcome them all to the stage.
Thanks, Mel.
Hi. I was hoping that we could first go down the row and just talk about our own relationship with AI and why we're here, basically. Do you want to start, Dashiel? Yeah.
Sure. I'm Dashiel Carrera. I'm working as a researcher at Columbia, like Melanie was saying, on human-centered AI research. I wrote a novel back in 2022 called The Deer. And right around the time the book was coming out, large language models were starting to take over and ChatGPT was everywhere. And I started to see how the literary community was changing, how people were changing about the way they thought about writing. So I decided to pursue a doctorate. That's what I've been doing for the last few years, is running a series of events and putting out research, which I hope ensures that literary values are maintained as this technology continues to develop. So as part of that, I did an article with Los Angeles Review of Books that came out recently, another event like this at AWP last year, and a few other things.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tuhin. I'm kind of an outlier in this group in a way that I'm not the only person who's not a writer. I'm a computer scientist. I'm a computer science professor. I have been working in AI for probably the last 8 years, before even generative AI became popular and percolated our lives. But recently, I've been sort of more interested in the questions about if AI is becoming capable, how is it getting there? It's probably getting there because it's extracting a lot of human labor, and especially for this group, it's really relevant because we all know that these LLMs are trained on copyrighted works with or without licensing. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to do more empirical work at the intersection of computer science, public policy, law, and economics to address these questions around how we can make this world a little bit fairer for authors and a little less fairer for technology companies.
Great. I'm Bruce Holsinger. My most recent novel, Culpability, was about the moral frameworks, the ethics of artificial intelligence. It's a contemporary family drama that begins with an accident in an autonomous vehicle and just thinks about the ethics of AI from various angles. I'm also an educator. I'm an English professor at the University of Virginia who is just kind of semi-legitimately appointed a president who is who's very much kind of cramming AI down the throats of the faculty in all kinds of ways that are troublesome to many of us. But I'm also a medievalist, a historian of the book and of text technology. And my last academic book was on the history of parchment. And I'm currently just in the early stages of writing a new nonfiction book on AI and the humanity of art, and thinking about artists who have been engaged with various technologies that we think about as artificial intelligence across a number of mediums.
And yeah, I'm Maris Kreizman. I wrote a book called I Want to Burn This Place Down, so I'll be the angry one. For a while in the 2010s, I was able to earn a living wage from freelance writing, mostly writing about books. I see AI build as this innovative technology everywhere I turn, but all I can see is the destruction of the environment and the labor force and copyright law and privacy and making the rich richer. And so I want to ask, why is this being shoved down our throats so heartily?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It almost sort of started as this intellectual thing, that what it means for a machine to be smart, like do these things. And the discourse has sort of shifted now more towards automation. And just to be transparent, this is not particularly just about writers. I mean, they want to automate everything. They want to automate lawyers, doctors, even computer scientists. And it's funny, like computer scientists are okay with their code being written by AI, which means at some point of time, we all will also probably be extinct. So I guess the issue is, and of course, this is some of the perils of neoliberalism, capitalism, everything, whatever you call it, that of course, if you can produce things at a very cheaper cost, then you do not need human labor. So I guess, and because now this is possible, there's a lot of money and concentration at these like big tech companies, and also only a few people are getting to govern this, right? I mean, OpenAI or Anthropic or Google, and there is extreme amount of lobbying with the government. So there is lack of regulation, lot of cash inflow. And then, of course, that leads to this sort of catastrophe where we as humans do not have enough agency, or we don't really know how to control this. I think that's the bigger issue, I feel.
And I was going to use, you used the word capitalism. I think that's the number one answer. But capitalism, hand in hand with that goes competition, fear, speed, what Anna Kornblue calls immediacy, the desire for immediate satisfaction, immediate answers. But speed is, speed, the race for technology between companies, between countries. To quote J.D. Vance, sorry, the history of the future of AI will be won not by hand-wringing about safety, but by speed, right? So it's speed, 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 faster, faster, faster. So that's one answer. So, cram everywhere all at once.
There was a recent NBC News poll that said 57% of Americans believe the risks of AI outweigh the benefits. They feel more negatively about AI than they do about anything except Iran and the Democratic Party.
Oh, man.
So Trump, AOC, any other politician, everybody else is above AI. Why do you think that is?
What a loaded question. I think that AI is a great unknown. I mean, that's why everyone's talking about it. And not only is it unknown to the general public what's going to happen next, but it's unknown to the people that develop it. So artificial intelligence is built up of large quantities of data sets which are smashed together, and then inference is applied over and over and over again. And the capabilities of large language models seem to change every day. We're learning about new things that are capable of as time goes on. We don't know what's going to happen within the next couple of years, and because it's such an unknown, it's very easy to make dystopian predictions or utopian predictions, depending on who you ask. And that is, I think, why it just sort of really grips the American mindset, is that it has an extraordinary mystique, and that the stakes are so high.
I wonder if we could step back and try to come up with a working definition of AI, both as you see it and maybe what people like me who are mad and afraid think about it.
I'm definitely not going first on that one. I think Tuhin, you should probably.
I think, again, I feel right now in the current cultural discourse, the way we sort of define AI is very different from how AI sort of had its inception. It was always about this algorithm that is predictive, which is smart enough to do a task that typically a human can do. And through history, if you look at it, we have always had smart algorithms. I mean, think about Google, where you're typing and it's a predictive search, and then it can complete your sentence, or like even in your smartphones or any sort of thing. So a lot of these are AI. It's just that generative AI is a whole different thing. So AI just means artificial intelligence. So like a human is something that is supposed to have intelligence. So when a machine has some sort of like semblance of intelligence, or like something that looks like intelligence, then you call it artificial intelligence. That's how it sort of came into being. And of course, now when it becomes too powerful, then there are these sort of like claims or comparisons about human-like intelligence, or like now you even hear the term superhuman, which I don't even know what it means. Like, am I a superhuman? Probably not. But yeah, I think artificial intelligence was a goal, but now it's more like a service, because you can sell that and you can make money. So I feel that has changed over time.
The vagueness of the definition, I think, is also why we hear about it all the time, because it's such an it thing and such a vague definition. A tech company can apply it to almost anything that they're doing, and then all of a sudden seed money will start to flood in from venture capitalists. So it's a very easy strategy if you're a tech company, and so it's part of why it's everywhere. Also, our definition of AI has shifted really radically. So one of the first examples of like a chatbot, Tuhin, I'm sure knows this, is the Eliza chatbot, which was supposed to act like a therapist you'd go back and forth with. This is like 1965 at MIT. And the way it worked is it would operate like a Rogerian psychiatrist. So you would say like, I'm feeling really bad about my dog that's sick, and it would say, and how do you feel about your dog that's sick? And it would just keep going back and forth like that over and over again. And at the time, people were wowed, like, oh my God, I've never seen such an intellectual being. But of course, anyone nowadays would pick up on that immediately. So the definition keeps shifting. But yeah, like I would agree with Tuhin. Usually when people say AI today, they mean generative AI, meaning not necessarily like autonomous vehicles, usually AI that is generating text in some way, generating images, something that's creating something. And that's really the most fraught ground that brings up a lot of ethical issues.
But I do think the autonomous vehicles, autonomous weaponry, especially, which has been in the news lately, with the Anthropic and OpenAI disputes and contracts with the U.S. government. I think that it's such a I think it's Emily Bender, right, who points out that how sloppy a term it is for so many different technologies grouped under. You're right about grouped under this money-friendly kind of rubric.
So I read about the environmental impact of AI. And again, I feel like this can mean 1 zillion different things, but I'm hearing about data centers, and I'm hearing about all the water that they use. is it even ethical to continue going on with AI if it's so environmentally destructive?
So first off, I would say there's a distinction between kind of like the training of these models and the use of these models environmentally. So the training uses an extraordinary amount of energy. And kind of at the low end, if you're making a new large language model, you're probably going to consume the amount of energy of like 10,000 US homes in a year. I mean, just like really, really extraordinary amount. If you use a model, on the other hand, and kind of query it, I think the latest stat that I saw was that you'll probably use, in an hour of going back and forth with a model, the equivalent of like 1 hour of laptop use. So to kind of like be double the amount of a laptop, which is a lot, I think like worth deep consideration and something we want to be aware of. And I feel like there should be more reports that are sent out like to users of large language models to make sure that they're understanding what their carbon footprint is, but probably at the scale that we'd consider also like our dryer and our carbon footprint from flights and other things. But an easy way around that is just to stop training new models. They've been training so aggressively for so long, they could just stop now. They're already capable of a lot. I'm not sure why that hasn't been pursued as an angle yet by policymakers.
What does worth it mean, though? When you ask that question, what does that mean? Worth it for?
Are the benefits to society worthy of the amount of destruction that we're doing?
Right. And so one of the characters in my novel is Lorelei Shaw, who is kind of this world-leading figure in the ethics of AI, and she wrestles with these things, right? One of the things she does is help build and make good the algorithms that run autonomous vehicles in different forms. And so if she were answering that question, if she were here, she would say, it's complicated, but we lose 40,000 people on the highway every year in the United States. If these technologies, if we get to the point where we're only losing 5,000 people on the highways because of these vehicles, because they're not checking their phones or drinking. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that, but that would be what she would say, is that saving of those lives, is that worth the expenditure? I met at an event in Alabama, I met a cancer researcher who works on genomics, studying how advanced genomics with machine learning can address rare diseases that are too rare to get funding from the NIH. Is that worth it to save the 4 people who were afflicted with that very rare genomic disease a year if we can use these machine learning technologies? So he would say yes, but again, at what expense, right? So those are always really, really complicated, and if we limit it to large language models and what they're doing to writing, I don't know. I wonder if there are much larger ethical questions too.
Yeah, I mean, the trolley problem was
exactly, yeah.
all over Culpability, and there wasn't really a solution.
No, there was no solution to the trolley problem.
Spoiler alert, I'm sorry. When I was mostly working as a journalist in the 2010s, if some journalist lost their job, was laid off, someone on social media would say, in all caps, "Learn to code."
I remember that.
So now there are no coding jobs. What will this do to the labor market? What will this do to writers and to publishers and literary agents and the like?
I mean, I actually think that might actually be a boon for writers, because as someone who's a computer scientist, I don't necessarily think AI can ever write a very good book. I mean, it can write a bad book, it can write a derivative book, but maybe this is the time for creatives to sort of like shine and rise up, because, and it's funny, it's not only me, actually, Anthropic's co-CEO, Daniela Amore, she said that the humanities are going to be more and more important, which is kind of ironic coming from her, but I also feel that it's true, because I mean, AI can do amazing math, it can do amazing physics, chemistry, now genomics, what Bruce was saying, coding, of course, but I still think it's pretty bad at writing at any sort of like arguments about the humanities. So maybe this is a good time. Like, and the good thing is like, there is always this AI slop. Even though if AI writes an essay on the humanities, it's really bad. It's like very synthetic, surface level. So you can immediately smell AI ticks. So that's a good thing, right? Because if AI writes code, you cannot detect it. You'll just use it. But if AI writes sloppy text, you can detect it. So maybe that's a little bit of a boon for the humanities.
But we just saw in the Times, that was the most recent example, but you talk about this with Tuhin Chakrabarty in the New Yorker too, how really well-read, trained people are having a more difficult time telling the difference.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a tricky thing, and
How does that square with what you just said?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, my experiment, which I did with Vohini, is a little bit of a futuristic experiment, right? Like everyone who is using AI to write is not really fine-tuning an AI on an author's entire lifetime worth of work. I think they are just going to chatgpt.com and saying, write me 2 paragraphs of this like heated rivalry derivative novel, which is what AI is pretty good at doing that, right? I mean, so yeah, that sort of stuff it will write, and I'm sure without disclosure, people might even think that this is written by a human and they would buy it. So one of the things that we talk about in our work also is that there is this urgent need for AI disclosures. And this is not just in writing. I mean, the New York State just had this rule that if you have a model that is AI generated on billboards, you need to disclose that this is AI generated. So for writing, if we have AI generated, then the power shifts to us consumers. Like if I don't want to buy AI generated books or AI art, I have that agency and choice. And I feel that this sort of regulation has to pass, because if that is passed, then I guess there is a market for low quality AI stuff. There's a market for high quality human stuff. The choice is yours, which one you want to buy. I would always want to buy a human written novel. So yeah, I think this is not really hard in terms of regulation. I think this can be done.
Yeah, I thought that New York Times article was a bit odd in some ways, in that it demonstrated that if you do sort of like an A/B comparison between like a couple sentences written by an AI and a couple sentences written by a person, that people might tend towards an AI in preference. But I wonder if that's really a fair comparison between literature. You know, if you're looking like a few sentences out of context, I do think in large part what people look for is how readily can you orient yourself within the text? Can you tell what's going on really quickly, because you're not getting to read what happened before and get all the context that was necessary, also sort of the cultural context in which the text was written, and think it through. So I saw like a sample where Cormac McCarthy was emulated, and then a real piece from Cormac McCarthy was also placed next to it. And I kind of understood why someone would prefer the other version. It's because it's much easier to parse. And the version that was actually written by Cormac McCarthy, in some ways, is very odd. Like if you looked at the sentence, it looked like it was off kilter.
And that's what we love about it.
Yeah, that's what we love about it. And I think I could see people guessing it's AI too, because in my experiments, if people see something that's off kilter, kind of in this context, sometimes they'll say, "Oh, it's off kilter. It's probably AI." But it can be very different when you see it in the context of a book, and you get used to what Cormac McCarthy is doing other sentences, and he teaches you how to read that passage by the time you get to it.
Dash, do you think that is a function of genre? Like literary fiction, yes. Like we'll put Cormac McCarthy against AI, whatever. But I'm thinking of another piece in the New York Times by Alexandra Alter about this romance generator named Coral Hart, right? I wouldn't call her a writer, I'd call her a prompter. She's a romance prompter, right? And publishes 200 novels a year, prompting AI to publish romance novels that they're self-published, but they've netted her a decent living.
6 figures.
Yeah, 6 figures, right. And so and without anyone batting an eye. Right, the consumers, the kind of mass consumers of mass market self-published romance.
I will add that
Yeah.
I checked her Goodreads scores, and they are really miserable. They're like average 2.0 ratings. So that gives the reader some credit there.
Yeah. But I'm just curious, like that. So who is being, can they, can those productions satisfy the readers of a particular genre?
I think it has to
Are
do
we
with
already there?
Yeah, like genre and also sort of readerly disposition. That's something that's been coming up in a lot of the
Yeah, that's-
experiences.
yeah.
Even with some literary readers, they read in this very like new critical mode where they don't really care about the cultural context or the author. They sort of take the text for what it is. They read with kind of an escapist mentality. They're not looking like push themselves in a particular way. But I think in science fiction, there's some readers that read like that and don't read like that. I don't know if I'd quite map it to a particular genre. But yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot is in literature, it seems like we're so interested in some kind of active self-expression and trying to get that expression and intentionality onto the page and finding that way into a particular cultural network. In some ways, like the fact that AI could generate a book and you could put that instead seems irrelevant because we're interested in that particular cultural network and that act of expressing ourselves to a particular niche that we're excited about receiving us. So yeah, that's kind of also think about a lot. It's like why is maybe an AI can win some A/B tests that we sort of put up in the New York Times, but is that relevant to the venture of literature in the long term?
Yeah.
I do want to add one thing though. So what Maris was saying. So these people who are using AI to write and publish on Kindle, they're actually not using their own names. They're sort of inventing these names. So a lot of people, and I have some experiments where I've actually figured out that there are books that are fully AI generated, but has 40,000 reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, and they're like 3.6 stars, 7 stars. So there are some people who have done pretty well in sort of camouflaging. Like it's a little tricky. I mean, but again, of course, these are genre fiction. A lot of them are sort of like, say, BDSM novels or like romance novels, like not the prestigious elite fiction, but it's like, and who am I to say what is elite or not elite? But it's like, it's interesting because a lot of them are very formulaic. And one of the things that I do worry about is that sure, right now there is a lot of demand for a certain sort of genre fiction. So it's like, so with the success of Heated Rivalry, now if someone tries to write a lot of formulaic AI, sort of like sports romance, then readers might actually want to buy it and read it. So I guess there's a lot of responsibility for platforms also. Like, why is Amazon not doing anything to stop that?
So that gets me to, because those books were generated by plagiarizing.
Yes.
Let's talk about LLMs as plagiarism, because we're writers. We're trying to make money on the written word, and it does feel like we're being fleeced by tech bros who don't care about literature at all.
Yeah, hard to agree. Yeah, I mean, four of my previous novels are in that stew in the Books 3 database, which is part of the pile, which is, you guys could describe it better than I could, but one of the big text training bases for large language models. So yeah, I think that's something that is of concern to anyone who's published, that our novels have been sucked into this machine. But it's also a huge concern for people who teach. Students who are writing, and it feels, to me, it feels like these very sacred kind of traditions of putting words and sentences together and also taking them apart, which go back thousands of years, is being broken by these models, and in ways that are so worrying. It's not just for young people, the people that I teach, but across generations, and so it feels like this kind of desolation of smog in some ways that both for contemporary literary culture and for the history of writing and reading, things I worry about.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit specifically about the Anthropic suit, because I'm signed up to get my $3,000. I don't know about other authors.
It's kind of fascinating, right? So what Bruce talked about, Books 3, that's exactly the reason, and that's of course copyright infringement because they did download it from some pirated website, and it's like 180,000 books, which they used for training their language model Claude. But one of the more egregious things, which actually was sort of deemed as fair use, is they bought, I think, millions of books from the Google Books ex-contractor, and then they took pictures of it, digitized it. There is this article in the Washington Post by Natasha Tiku where she actually had the picture of the warehouse. There were all these books where they had taken picture of them, digitized them into text, tore off the binding, and then transformed them into the hard drive and then use that to train the language models. And the reason for this is to seek legal compliance, because of course, if you download from a pirated website, you can be sued. But if you bought the book and then scanned and did whatever you did, then I guess you can sort of like pass off as fair use. And of course, the US copyright law and fair use, these things are very complicated. This is a new beast. I think everyone is trying to make sense of what this means. But it's interesting that even if you do not pirate these books, so say if you buy this book and then you scan, and of course they have a lot of money, so they can buy every book in the world to scan it and train it, and then that's not illegal downloading, but it's still kind of problematic, and it does, and if you're really talking about the broader culture, it of course like causes a lot of harm to the culture, but then also market harm, right? Because if you're training on my book and you're sort of writing derivative books in my style, then what does that mean? And I think these are still very early on conversations, because to actually prove market harm, it's really hard. And of course you need to show empirical evidence. Like you cannot, a lot of these lawsuits where plaintiff authors have lost against these tech companies is only because they haven't been able to show that training language models on this book actually disrupts the market for the author. So I think that if we can show that, then there's a lot of promise for plaintiff authors to win, and also to have some sort of either a conversation about licensing or like, I mean, of course, these are all legal things and whatever the Supreme Court will decide, but I think so far there hasn't been that kind of empirical evidence. I think it's only now starting to get more and more prominent. So I think there is also this urgent need for people who are not in the Anthropics and the OpenAI to sort of get together and work in this space to help the community.
I'll also add that you absolutely do not need to pirate large quantities of books in order to make a large language model, which is, I think, what makes this even more egregious.
Right.
So right now, I was just working with MIT Press recently. They're trying to figure out whether or not licensing deals could be brokered for some of their authors, for those of them who are okay with it. They receive some kind of compensation, maybe for every time that their work is mentioned and queried in it, or some flat fee for the training data. Or just kind of asking different creative writers too, like consensually, if there was a large language model that was constructed for creative writers by creative writers, would you be okay with having your text included? And one of our colleagues is trying to do precisely that, Katie Giro. She's been trying to build a new large language model for this purpose. So it's interesting to think somehow these big tech companies have managed to convince the world that in order to help with genetic research and some of these accessibility things, which are really wonderful, like we can generate closed captioning immediately now using large language models, they're really useful. Then in order to accomplish that, the sort of few eggs to break an omelet that they had to do was mass piracy of contemporary books. It was completely unnecessary. And they absolutely could stop and construct another large language model and backtrack.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, too, that the models don't have to be large. There's all kinds of creative people who have worked with small language models. I'm sure you know the poet Lillian Yvonne Bertram at University of Maryland, who for years has been putting together small language models to kind of interact with and recuperate, study differently, collaborate with Black poetic traditions, but not by going outside, but by creating their own models, which is a really interesting way of approaching it. But it's also it's also AI.
Yeah, you can also run large language models on your laptop now. They're sort of minified versions.
Wow.
And those versions don't always consume the same large quantities of energy that the other ones do. Yeah. They definitely don't consume the same large quantities of water. And for some reason, still, if anyone wants to use AI, they go straight to ChatGPT or Anthropic and start pouring out water and bringing more energy.
What can we do as writers right now to prevent this? Is there something we can ask our publishers for? The Authors Guild just released this new little symbol that you can put on the copyright page of your book that says human-made. Are there any other things to add to that list?
Yeah, I feel there are two things that I do want to raise. So one thing is like, I've been sort of like doing this sort of participatory work with a lot of writers over the last few years. One thing is that we have to be sort of on board with the fact that these models can actually write in a way that it can cause harm to the market, because there is a lot of dismissal also at the first, because of course the discourse and rhetoric around it is so bad that, okay, we are going to replace you. A lot of people just develop this reaction that, okay, I don't even want to talk about it. So like we definitely need to address the elephant in the room where, okay, there is this technology, it's been trained on my work, it can actually cause me harm. So sort of getting bored and getting in terms with that. And then I also feel that for publishers and agents and all these things, I think the AI detectors, at least some of the AI detectors, work really, really well. So if you're really trying to just grift, like if you did not do any labor, and if all you're doing is you're a prompt engineer where you're just prompting and then just generating prose and then just like copy pasting that, then I guess you can be very well caught red-handed. So then I guess there will be some sort of like penalty for that. And then I guess in terms of shaping public policy and these sort of things, like I guess there has to be definitely changes in law. So I guess like maybe talking to your senators, like I was discussing with someone that one of the things that Dems can use in the like upcoming thing is definitely protection like against AI, because I guess if there is no regulation, I feel it's really difficult to like stop it, because like every day there is this new model coming out, and I think for any sort of very like powerful technology, there has to be some guardrails, some regulations in place. Like you cannot just say that, okay, if there is regulation, we stop innovation. Of course you can innovate, but I mean, and of course, when AI is used, when books are used to train AI, they always call it transformative, because of course, you're not just using AI to write books, you're using AI to do a lot of other things. But then you should also then stop AI to write books. If you're allowing AI to write books, then it's no longer transformative. So I guess there has to be some sort of guardrails in that. Like, so the platforms like Amazon, I mean, if they are selling self-published books that are AI generated, they need to be held accountable. The FTC should come into place and stop.
So we're going to hold Amazon accountable? Is that what you're
they are the biggest culprit in this, right? I mean, they are the one who's selling these self-published books. And they have done a good job in sort of identifying these sort of like authors who publish in very heavy volume, like 200 novels a year. But yeah, I think regulation is something that's definitely very important in AI. And there's a lot of lobbying from tech to regulate.
Sure.
So the lobbying doesn't have to be from tech. It has to be from people who are not in tech. Because if there is too much lobbying from tech, I mean, Google, Anthropic, everyone sort of like lobbied to scrape off copyright law. But that would be disastrous, right?
Yes.
And also maybe the solution also is partly about affect and emotion, you know. Maybe we need a new disdain or a new condescension, right, on behalf of analog authorship. And analog artistry in general. I don't know if many of you have heard of Tilly Norwood.
Yes.
Does that name ring a bell? An AI-generated actress and singer. And Ethan Hawke had this incredible reaction a few weeks ago. He was asked about her, and he just blew his stack. And he said, "I hate AI. I'm in full-scale revolt. I like the way people smell. And it was just a beautiful reaction. And there was something about that was very stirring.
That's lovely. What happens to our ability to think creatively, to be curious about the world, or just basically our ability to read if we're using LLMs so much?
So I definitely think that the way that the big players in the field are designed right now is designed to pacify the intellect in a pretty dramatic way. You just think about what it's like to power up ChatGPT. It opens with, "How can I help you? Just tell me what to do for you. I'm not going to talk back to you or ask you more clarifying questions. Just tell me what to do. I'll do it for you, and you don't have to worry about it." And one of our colleagues, Max Kreizman, published a paper pretty recently that demonstrated that writers that were trying to write creatively with AI tended to homogenize a lot in their different creative outputs. So they noticed that a lot of the different work that they were doing tended to converge on similar topics, and the language they're using was really similar. But it also doesn't have to be that way. It could be designed in such a way where it scaffolds creative thinking or scaffolds critical thinking instead. It could say to you, I noticed that you used a cliche here, because who's more familiar with cliches than ChatGPT? And it could instead be asking you more questions and pushing you to think more deeply instead. This is all kind of baked into the design and a particular sort of enterprise-oriented way in which large language models have been built, at least the most popular platforms.
I think with teaching too, there's a lot of room for. I was at a focus group with some UVA students a few weeks ago, and the students, undergrads, and they were saying things like, we want to be forced to close our laptops and put our phones away. We want to be forced to read a physical hard copy book, right? And this desire for AI-free and digital-free spaces. You're seeing this all over the place now, of course. But I think that's important about that desire to recover reading, and I think playing on that desire and giving credit to that and going with it is going to be really important for this next generation of education, I think. I don't know if you all have had similar experiences with your students.
Yeah, I mean, I have a no laptop policy in my class. Like,
In computer science?
Yeah, if you're coming to my lecture, just hear me talk for 90 minutes. Yeah, I think you'll probably miss out on some fun which you were having on your laptop while I was lecturing, but I think that's fine. Yeah, I think I really like the device-free idea. I mean, I was looking at Twitter a couple of days back, and someone was calling that we need a AI-free zone. Like, I think one very exciting thing is we need to label AI. I think the whole shtick of AI is fooling people into believing that this was done by a human. I think I want everything that is AI generated to have a label, and then I feel that we can reclaim our space. Like, knowing that something is generated by AI, like if I open social media and if I see AI slop, of course, right now I'm still guessing if it's AI or not. But if I already know labeled as AI, I'm just going to scroll through. I mean, there is a lot of bad content anyway, and I think I choose how to engage with it. So I feel that, and I think there are the current new generation. There are very thoughtful students who understand the ramifications of this, and they don't want to use AI. I mean, they do want to learn. I was reading this Hollywood Reporter article where it was saying that Gen Z is keeping the movies alive. So it's like, yeah, if Gen Z is going to watch movies, Gen Zs will also read books. So I feel that maybe one way to defeat this whole AI hype is just to like make sure that we know what is AI and what is human. I think right now we are sort of like at the stage where we sort of win by fooling people into believing that something is AI is human. If we know, then I guess that's the end of it, right? I'll choose a human.
With that, I think we'd love to start taking some questions. I'm sure that many of you have them, so don't be shy.
The microphone is that. Yeah.
Yes, this could be directed toward any of the panelists, but I'd like to know what your opinion is about the new AI writing software, be it PaperPal, Grammarly, and there's another one called PseudoWrite, which has been derided as a program for pseudo writers.
Also created by another writer, James Yu.
I don't have feelings about them. I don't know.
Well, I can take that. I mean, about Grammarly, I mean, I'm sure you've read it was just sued. It's now under a class action suit because it basically stole expert advice without author's consent. So yeah, I guess that's the answer. In terms of PseudoWrite, yeah, I've sort of tried to play with it a little bit, and they sort of say that it's going to change writing, and it's just basically ChatGPT prompting. Like, you don't necessarily need to use PseudoWrite. You can create your own prompts in ChatGPT and write the same. So I don't necessarily think PseudoWrite is anything revolutionary. There is also novel.ai, which Of course, people want to make money out of these things. I mean, they're saying that it's going to help writers write, so they have a couple of prompts and like they'll say, oh yeah, develop this character, rewrite this scene. But you can do all of that anyway in Claude or ChatGPT if you prompt. I don't necessarily think it's anything useful. And I don't think anyone who is serious about the profession of writing would go use those tools. But I think these sort of softwares will always exist.
I think pseudo-write's pretty fascinating. So I think the way that it works is basically has like a series of different sections where you can fill out descriptions of a character, a plot outline. You can start with like a brain dump where you like try and just write out different ideas that you have. And what it does is it kind of tries to translate between them and piece them together into components of a novel. I've never gotten good output out of it myself. I've never seen great output come out of it. But as a mode, it is curious to me. It's not the way that I think about composing my novels at all. I kind of start from the beginning and go to the end. But I did, in one of my studies, encounter a writer who had really leaned into using large language models. And part of the way he did it is he really built up a world within the large language model and taught it different pieces of the world, and it kind of kept track of characters for him. And as he wrote something new, it would tell him whether or not it contradicted something he'd said earlier, was impartial to the world, and he would put images in it, other things. So it's a very interesting way of thinking about composing literature, I think, or composing any book, where you're able to kind of translate between these different like pieces that you see, like you see the character first, you see the plot outline first, and you can kind of translate between them. So I'm curious to see what comes out of it, but I've yet to be wowed yet by anything that I've seen.
Hi, I'm just curious about, in your daily work right now, do you actually use AI as part of your workflow? And also, so just as what we've already been talking about, just incorporating AI as part of the writing process, like brainstorming or organizing your thoughts, do you think that is all, and then, using the human generation to actually put the words onto paper. Do you categorize that as also AI literature? And if so, is that like similarly detrimental to the future of literature? Thank you.
I'll start on this one. I don't use it for composing anything. I was asked by a lawyer who was telling me about all the efficiencies that his firm has discovered with the use of large language models. And I think in legal writing and in digital discovery, going through 10 million digital documents, I think now in law that there's so much training going on for AI. And he asked me, wouldn't it be more efficient if I had a large language model that I could just enter my characters in, my setting, my, the premise of the novel and wouldn't it be more efficient for me to let it write for me? And my reaction was, you can, if you're billing your clients in 12-minute increments, efficiency is important. But for art, wandering is important, and getting lost and getting frustrated. So for me, I guess part of it also is just I'm afraid of starting, because I think with anybody who's writing, you might have a word count goal for the day. I really need to write 1,000 words today. I really need to write for 3 hours today and see what I come up with. I'm late on a deadline. So efficiency is a little bit scary, right? And so I worry about the temptation sometimes. So I don't know if you struggle with that as a novelist or Maris. Yeah, I just worry that that way lies madness, and so it's for me. And I haven't answered the second part of your question, but.
Yeah, I'll give an anecdote for adds madness. So in my creative process, I've never used a large language model seriously. Maybe it's like a souped up thesaurus once or twice.
Yeah.
Because you can get like a really, really long list of words, usually, which makes you realize that the word I was looking for didn't actually exist in the first place. But just the other day, I had to write a very high stakes email. And I felt like, okay, this is such a high stakes email for this particular situation. I should run it by someone. And all I have is this large language model. I'm short for time. So I ran it by the large language model. And I spent half an hour drafting the email. And then I spent another hour going like back and forth with the large language model. And for what? The email got like a little bit better, maybe, but because it was like a high stakes situation, I felt like I had to get as many pieces of advice as I could. So yes, therein lies madness, I think. Do you use large language models as part of your work?
I'm an accomplice. Yeah, I'm in a department where I cannot really survive without using language models.
Right.
But I never use language model in my own scientific writing. I think my PhD student is somewhere in the audience. The first thing I told her once she started the program is, if you write your paper using a language model, I'm gonna make you rewrite the whole paper. So choose your time wisely. Do not do that. So.
Going back to the A/B test idea, I mean, it's a nice idea to think that with some regulation, maybe people would have the choice between AI writing and human writing, and that they would prefer the human writing. But then that also clashes against the idea of, J.D. Vance's sage, comment about how it's all about speed for these developers. So there's kind of the question of what kind of damage, potentially long-term or irreparable damage, could be done, for instance, to publishing before this theoretical regulation, which we'll see if that kind of thing would happen anyways, happens. So especially from a publishing standpoint specifically, I mean, obviously last year we already saw a lot of layoffs in publishing, but even besides that, like, is there damage that has potentially already been done to book publishing, or that maybe we're approaching an inflection point that'll be hard to come back from, that would be a result of these things?
Maris, I feel like you're in the industry, like,
Yeah,
really connected.
I think that anytime in book publishing we make blanket statements that quantity is better than quality, it does damage. It's already doing damage. The PRH CEO said that they were going to increase their output by using LLMs to produce books. And I think that is harm right there. And I don't know how much time has been wasted. Like, I have a lot of friends who have meetings about AI to talk about like what they could do with AI, and there's brainstorming and then nothing happens. And it's like, you could have answered 12 queries in that time,
I think one interesting point to your question about what do we have to show before this can be a regulation? I think I'm a big proponent of detection. So there are these volumes of books that are coming out, but at this point of time, there is no idea about provenance. We don't necessarily know what is human AI mixed, what is fully AI. So I guess maybe there has to be some sort of embarrassing inflection point where something written by AI is really going to be popular, maybe even win a prestigious literary prize, and we all will be very ashamed. And maybe that will sort of start this conversation that, okay, we really need to regulate it, because we have all the means to regulate it. The bigger question is, why are we not?
I feel like I want to write a novel about that scenario.
Yeah,
That's
interesting.
Yeah, that just opened my head to the question. I've been thinking a lot about, like, if I read an amazing book that changed my life and then I found out Trump wrote it, like, how would that make me feel? And I wonder, if you read a book that you thought, this is the best book I've read in the last 12 months, and then you found out it was written by an AI, how would that make you feel? What would that make you think about art and authorship?
There's a wonderful novel by Nnedi Okorafor, The Death of the Author.
So good.
That is very much like right in that alley. I won't spoil it for you, but it's in many ways about AI writing, but it's a deeply human book too. So I think that's almost the answer to that question, is that novel, I think.
I've actually been doing a series of experiments recently where I've been doing exactly what you just described. So I showed people different pieces of writing, and then afterwards would say to them, this was actually generated by AI, to see how people feel. And something I've been noticing is just a sense of sadness, just kind of I've been calling it like algencolly is the name I've been using for it. Just the sense that like there's some word. Kind of like just melancholy from knowing, oh, so someone just, instead of going through the pain of creation and trying to render something that was representative of their experience, just thought of the artistic process as this labor that they had to do and wanted to just generate it and have some finished artifact at the end. And that was their attitude towards artistic creation. It's kind of knowing that that's out there and that that created something is very, very unsettling, I think, in a really deep way. But I also find that people sometimes say, oh, well, I liked it. It's like I already had like a positive reaction to it. It was effective. I don't know. I don't know if I care where it came from. Books come from all sorts of places. Depends on your standpoint as a reader, I think.
Yeah, there's also the category of anonymity, right? 90% of the writing that survives in the Middle Ages is anonymous. And so it's detached from a specific human, or a specifiable human already. So there may be some analogy there.
Yeah,
perhaps not
Homer is AI.
Yeah, Homer.ai.
We've got time for one more question.
So my question is there more time for some of this AI to hit than we think, especially when it comes to writing? Because the one reason that it's so terrible at writing, it has very little idea of the physical world. It doesn't have a physical world model. It doesn't have a psychological model. It doesn't have a theory of the mind about the person. So is some of the alarmism a little too early? Yes, at some point you'll have robots that'll go out and experience the pain of like somebody they like dying or something. But there is a fundamental problem right now why it seems so fake. And are we being too alarmist? Do we still have more time than we think?
I would like to answer that and maybe debunk some of the things you said. So I don't necessarily agree that AI doesn't have a physical model or a theory of mind. There's been a lot of research that shows that AI has pretty good theory of mind, and also a lot of these embodied AI models, of course, they have an intuition about the physical world. I mean, I don't necessarily think, and also that doesn't necessarily matter because when you're producing text autoregressively, it's still very different from the human process of writing, but there is this creativity as a process and creativity as a product. Like what we are receiving from the LLM is the product. And if the product is good enough, if a reader thinks it is possible, then that's what all it needs to harm the culture or the market or everything. So I necessarily don't think it's alarmist. And I mean, anyway, these AI-generated books are being written, they are being sold. I mean, so I don't necessarily think you need theory of mind to write a romance novel. Of course, theory of mind is very intrinsic to human. I mean, how many times have you actually gone to a human and asked, do you have theory of mind? Like, have you taken a test? It's tacit. So, and if AI is trained on all over the internet, all the text, I mean, I cannot consume all that text in my entire life. So probably AI has better theory of mind than me, maybe, and I'm okay with it. I don't necessarily care if AI has better theory of mind than me, but I don't necessarily think we should dismiss AI's ability. I mean, these language models have been shown to do pretty good in role-playing as therapists. I mean, I see these New York Times opinion articles from very famous therapists who are saying that, oh, AI is great, it's going to change therapy. If it doesn't have theory of mind, how is it role-playing as a therapist? How does it have empathy? I mean, again, these are very existential questions. I don't necessarily know if AI has empathy, but I don't necessarily think we need to prove that AI has empathy to be showing that AI can cause damage to the literary world.
I think probably some forms of writing are more accessible to AI than others. There's lots of writers out there like David Shields or like my friend Tom Comida, for whom thinking of the novel as kind of a portmanteau or sort of like a collage of other existing works is a really useful and productive metaphor, which in some ways seems akin to large language models as a kind of remix of a training set. And there are others whom really rely, at least in their description of their process, as very expressive and coming from some kind of deep intuition and sensory experience. Descriptions of Toni Morrison, who we just passed on the stairwell, talking about like coming up with Beloved by looking at the way that light hits upon a lake. So if the question is, is it possible to generate good literature, or is it kind of alarmist? I think it's possible that large language models could generate significant work of some kind. But there might be another body of work that is less accessible because it's not embodied. And I'm curious if that work becomes much greater valued over the course of the next few years, and we start to shift and are thinking about what type of literature is uniquely human, and how that affects our prose and how we approach the process.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think maybe an oblique answer is I think one of AI's superpowers, one of the ways that there may already be superintelligence, is a complete moral indifference to us and our dilemmas, while being able to feign empathy in clever kinds of ways. To me, that already seems that's something I'm alarmed about.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.